So, I don't quite know how to begin this video because it's gonna be a bit of an awkward one. I guess let me just start by saying, generally speaking, I love and respect any kind of indie developer. I think making your own game from scratch, especially if you're a sole developer, is extremely difficult and takes a lot of time, a lot of resources. I think generally I've been also trying to become a little bit more supportive towards indie developers and indie projects. So for example, way back in 2022, I did like an entire video on Art of Rally. It was kind of like more talking about the camera in the game, but the video was definitely more about Art of Rally, which to this day, I think is still one of my favorite indie racing game experiences of all time. But even recently, I made a full-on review on JDM, Japanese Drift Master, which was a fairly new indie racing game that I really just wanted to check out and make a video on. So believe me when I say I want to actually support the indie racing game scene. I'm not making this video because I hate indie developers or whatever, but this is just a weird, isolated case where I just have to talk about a project and the person behind the project because it's just really interesting. It's like the kindest way I can put it. So what we're talking about here is a indie racing game called Overjump Rally. So currently the game is not available. There was a demo at some point in 2022. Unfortunately, it has been taken down for unknown reasons that we will probably never know. But basically, all you have to know is that this is a Unreal Engine 5 sort of pseudo remake or homage to the old Sega Rally games. This is something I think is super rad. I think this is a cool idea. I think just from the screenshots, it looks quite nice. But this is a project that I've also been aware of for a couple of years now, and I just kind of had like an eye on for like a little bit. And yeah, I was just really excited to just see more of this. Maybe like an extended demo at some point down the line, or maybe a release of some kind. Yeah, once again, this demo released in 2022 has been taken down, and there has been no updates. Maybe behind closed doors with like select people, there have been a few, but as far as what the public can access, this was it. There has been nothing. Now, in general, I would say this is fine. Obviously, this is an indie project, and so far nothing has been sold, no money has been exchanged. So really, this guy can take as long as he wants with this project. But it still makes me a little bit sad to see that this guy is basically wasting all of his time doing literally anything else but work on the game. At least it seems that way. And what makes this especially saddening is that the guy who works on this, who I'm just gonna call Xander, which is his online alias, is a pretty experienced guy. Like he, as he's saying himself here, he has been a VFX super advisor and VFX artist for the past 16 years. Something that he loves to keep boasting about. So much so that if you look up VFX under his Twitter handle, you will find out countless of mentions. Like, he mentions this constantly. This kind of reminds me of the PirateSoftware, like, I've been working at Blizzard for 15 years thing. We're still going. Now, this was a reply to a tweet from Dove7, where things were getting a little bit spicy. This is like just a little teaser. We'll get to this. But this is just kind of where things stood for the most part. I'm not sure when exactly I found out about the project. I think it must have been shortly after the demo released. Yeah, I've just been kind of like patiently waiting, playing other stuff until then. And I figured, hey, maybe at some point I'll hear from this guy and there's like some kind of demo. But yeah, once again, it is now 2025. It has been 3 years and there has been nothing other than the demo actually getting taken offline. But despite that, he has been in my own Twitter mentions, just basically advertising his game. And in a way that doesn't even make sense to me. So like my initial tweet here was, need me a modern racing game with crusty ass PS1 graphics. And then he replied, I can do the opposite. A retro racing game with UE5 next gen graphics. Okay, so two things. First of all, that is not what I was asking for. And second of all, you have nothing to share. And I can imagine, like, if there are any indie developers watching this video right now, they must be getting some really bad secondhand embarrassment from this, because this is just not good etiquette for how to approach content creators or generally people to check out your game. Usually all of us content creators, we have a business email, usually linked on our YouTube channel, that people can just contact us directly to if they want us to check out their games. Like every month I get a couple of requests from new indie developers that are like, that write like a formal email with like, hey, we love your content, we watched this and that video, we liked it, here's what our game is about, here's what we're working on, here's what it's gonna be like. And if they are able to, they actually share like a key or some kind of downloadable demo for me to check out. And usually I do like these kinds of approaches. Like I think it's really cool that I think it's a huge privilege that people work on stuff and then they go to me and want me to check it out. And if they do this through the right channels, like through my business email, and they present their project, there's a high likelihood I actually check out their game. However, looking through my mails, there's nothing here. Like, if I look for Overjump Rally, his game, there's nothing here. So, once again, like, this is just not the proper etiquette, you know? But this is just kind of how he does this. Like, so for example, here is like another random tweet where, I guess like some kind of like Sega-related website or journal is specifically asking for Sega fan art that isn't Sonic, Yakuza, Persona related. And he's like, my game is technically a Sega fan art. No, it's not. You're making a game. That is not what he's asking for. What does he even want with you? Like, it's secondhand embarrassment. However, if that's where things stood, I would be like, you know what? Whatever. You know, he can do what he wants as long as he keeps working on the game. I'd probably still check it out. Whatever, no big deal. However, over the last year or so, I want to say, he has been repeatedly in some kind of drama that painted not just him, but also his game project in a worse and worse light. So here's where this initially started. So you can see some gameplay of the game here if you've been wanting to check it out. And back then, this was just roughly around the time when either the Steam Deck was still coming out or was still very new. I'm not entirely sure. And his MO back then, like, keep in mind, this is like mid-2022. He stated that he wants Steam to be his major platform, and he's also going to have graphical settings in the game specifically for the Steam Deck. Once again, here's another example where he states, I definitely want to do Steam Deck optimization. And I was like, hey, awesome, what a cool idea, right? But keep in mind, those tweets were from 2022. And so if we fast forward, roughly 3 years later, his opinion on the Steam Deck and how he wants to support the Steam Deck, for some weird reason, has done a complete 180. Like, in here, he is quote tweeting a post that states how much the Steam Deck has sold worldwide in the last 3 years. And he kind of ridicules how little the Steam Deck has actually been selling. Your indie game has to run on the Steam Deck or you're missing out on a big chunk of the market crowd is very quiet all of a sudden. Kind of implying that you don't really need to appeal to the Steam Deck crowd if you want your indie game to sell. Which, that is such a weird take for so many reasons. There is no reason not to support the Steam Deck if you are able to. Like, as the initial post he was quoting was indicating, there have been up to 4 million units sold. So that is around 4 million users you are writing off that could that's potential sales that you are just completely writing off. And his reason for not wanting to support the Steam Deck seems to be here. So my game should look like hundreds of other games to cover that, instead of looking better and actually getting noticed? What are you talking about, dude? I mean, yeah, sure, if you want to make your game available on Steam Deck, there's a good chance you're gonna have to like lower a bunch of graphics settings for it to run properly, but what do you mean with should look like hundreds of other games? What does that even mean? And I'm not sure what you mean with looking better. I'm just gonna say this outright, I didn't initially want to say this, but your game looks like the most average Unreal Engine 5 game I have ever seen. Like, unless you do some really hard work to implement some kind of like art style through the UI or the menus, it looks like any other Unreal Engine 5 game I have ever seen. I'm sorry. And I don't think more people would buy your game because it looks good. Like, who actually still buys games for graphics? Especially indie games. Like, if you want to play something for graphics, you look at the big AAA stuff. Indie games specifically mainly get bought because of the gameplay, so the graphics hardly matter. Like, no one is gonna buy your game because it looks like an average Unreal Engine 5 game. But he still insists on this, right? Like, he's saying Steam Deck is a niche market, less than 2%. There's no point in considering it when making next-gen visuals. And while it is true that the Steam Deck only makes up around like 2 to 3% of the overall market on Steam of Steam users, what he either doesn't understand or seems to deliberately ignore is that Steam Deck users are more likely to buy and play more games than the average Steam users, particularly indie games. Like, you have to consider that the vast majority of Steam users only use Steam to play 1 or 2 games. Stuff like Counter-Strike or Dota or whatever, like these big multiplayer titles. That's what the vast majority of PC players on Steam is actually playing, whereas the 4 million Steam Deck users, those are the kind of people that would want to play and buy your game. In fact, check out some of Steam's own list of the top 100 games played on Steam Deck. So while you will still have some AAA games on here, literally the number 2 spot is Vampire Survivors, an indie game. Number 3 spot, Dave the Diver, which I guess technically is not an indie game, but could be considered as one. And then you have Palworld, an indie game. Stardew Valley, an indie game. Hades, Brotato, those are all indie games. And then if you compare this to the overall most played games on Steam, you'll have stuff like Counter-Strike, Dota, PUBG. Right, like, as you can see, there's such a big difference to what Steam users are playing and Steam Deck users are playing. So to still insist that he does not need to support the Steam Deck because no one's gonna play his game on the Steam Deck is such a hilarious self-own. And he has been called out multiple times for this take, but he still insists that this is an important lesson for indie devs, so I won't shut up. This is a dangerous lesson to teach, like, and this is exactly the kind of stuff why I wanna make a video on this. Is because the stuff he's virtue signaling is actually harmful. Like, if there's even one indie developer who takes his word as gospel, they're effectively harming their own game with this stuff. But what about his game, right? Like, it's been 3 years. Where is his game? Like, where are the updates? Has there ever been any demo? Unfortunately, no. And people keep asking for this. Like, pretty much any time he posts something about his game, there's at least one person that is asking, any chance of a new demo? And he insists. Very, very soon. This was posted 2 months ago. And once again here, someone's asking, when is the demo? And he's saying, very soon. I've been busy with some gigs. What gigs? You spend most of your time on Twitter. You're posting at a rate of tweets per hour, dude. Like, this is not a joke. This guy actually spends like an unbelievable amount of time getting into random arguments on Twitter all the time. This is actually something that really reminds me of YandereDev, unfortunately, where he's spending so much time just arguing with random people on social media instead of actually just shutting up and putting the time into his own game. And I'm gonna list a bunch of random examples that are gonna be gradually more and more controversial as we go on. So if you didn't know, iRacing is like a big simulator racing game, and they're making an arcade racer spin-off that has been announced recently. And he's asking, like, why the mobile game graphics though? Arcade games used to have the most advanced graphics in the business back in the 90s, but now they seem designed just for kids. Who cares? If this is the art style they wanted to choose for their first arcade racer, they can damn well do so. Like, I think that he has like a really weird obsession with like hyper-realistic graphics to the point where he just does not understand that why would you have a different art style than this. Like, this is clearly a small project and a new experiment for the iRacing team, so it makes sense that they're doing something that's a little bit easier to make, like on a smaller scale, with an art style that stands out a little bit more than your average hyper-realistic graphics. And like, especially as an indie developer, this is such a weird thing to criticize and scrutinize someone for. But this here was one of the more bigger controversies, so this was part of a, I want to say, like, kind of leak when it comes to Forza Horizon 6, where it was kind of unveiled that the people working on the next Forza Horizon actually flew out to Japan to scan and make photographs of various K cars. Probably indicating that the next Forza Horizon is going to be located in Japan. And this is all anyone cared about. But for some reason, this guy came in here and was like, that's not how you scan a car, but whatever. Who cares? Like, this is not, like, who cares about the actual method of how they're putting the car into the game? That is not what people care about. What people care about is that this is a strong indicator for the next location of the next Horizon game. But his point with this, which we're gonna get into a little bit more later, is that he had an issue with the technicality of this. So in the post, in the caption of the photo, which I can show again right here, he's both using the words shooting cars and scanning cars, right? And in the photo, he's clearly like making photos of the car instead of like actually scanning them. Like, here's actually an article that kind of goes into the detail of how to put various cars into a racing game and the difference between, you know, shooting and using reference photos versus actually scanning it. And the main difference you really need to know is that for scanning a model, you're basically wrapping the entire car in some kind of like reflective foil, so to say. versus if you're just making photos, you try to make as many photos from the car from as many angles as possible, and then you just kind of like overlap these photos when you're modeling the car. So these are two different methods to get a car into a game, and obviously the scanning method is a lot more costly because you have to bring all of the equipment, and usually the photographing is done for cars that aren't as relevant or aren't as important. And in this photo, the guy is implying that they are doing both, right? Like he's using the words shooting cars, which is probably used for this car here that you can see on the photo, but also scanning, which implies that maybe there are other cars that they have in a warehouse somewhere where they can actually do the whole scanning process. But he insists that this is not how you scan cars. This is not how you scan cars. What does he know? He's obviously not there. He's not part of the development team. He just doesn't understand that maybe they're doing both of these processes depending on which car deserves the scanning process more. But once again, he's just completely shutting off any kind of criticism that is thrown his way, rightfully asking, like, what do you know? And then once again, he's coming off with a basic excuse that he's been using a bunch of time, that he knows a thing about too about VFX and game development, as he's already clearly shown a bunch of times. I think the problem that he had with this post is in the quote, right? Where Wario64 is saying, scanning K cars for the next game. And then he's like, yeah, but that's not what he's doing in the picture. But that doesn't matter. He's still using the word scanning and referring to scanning cars in the caption, implying that while this might not be a car that they're scanning right now in this photo, they might still be scanning other K cars for the game. Like, I can't believe that I still have to argue about this because it's such an irrelevant and unnecessary technicality that, as I said earlier, no one cares about, except for him for some reason. And I want to just reiterate, he is constantly picking these kinds of arguments about pretty much anything. So here's a post about, I'm just going to be very transparent here, is completely out of my scope. Like, I have no idea what is being talked about here, but he is constantly arguing with random people on Twitter about the most random stuff. In fact, he's even arguing with Grok, Twitter's AI. Like, I cannot come up with a bigger waste of time than arguing with Grok AI, dude. And here's like another thing that I think, once again, it's just such a stupid technicality to die on. So this was basically an initial post that praised the graphics of Drive Club, which, yeah, that game holds up extremely well for its time. Like, this is an 11-year-old game at this point, and it looks great. In fact, in my last video, which you can check out here, we checked out the game on a PC emulator, and it still looks great. And then someone came in here and basically claimed that, oh, people are only showing off this game during a rainy scene where everything's glossy and there's a ton of screen reflection, implying that they're hiding that the game actually doesn't look as good, and it only looks good during weather scenes. And while it is true that the game looks at its best during, like, rain and weather, because, well, the weather effects are one of the best looking aspects of Drive Club that hold up extremely well, anyone who's played the game would agree that the game looks great during any kind of weather. Like, I cannot come up with any game from the year 2014 that still looks as good as Drive Club, or at least not many. Like, for its time, it was an incredible accomplishment where Evolution Studios, the people who worked on the game, really pushed the PS4 hardware to its limit at a time where the console was still very new, which was impressive. And then he's basically signal boosting this initial criticism, saying 700 likes over 34k views on this tweet here. That's twice the average. How, like, first of all, like, how do you know what a good ratio of views versus likes are? Like, I think this kind of shows how chronically online he is, that 700 likes over 34,000 views is twice the likes of average. Like, that, I wouldn't even know about anything about this. And then he's saying that it's a great take. Which, like, that, to me, that is so disrespectful to the people who worked on the game, who worked so hard to push the game, to push the console to its absolute limits and get the game to look as good as it does. Like, this is the kind of stuff that just doesn't make you look good in any way, to just kind of, like, denounce the work of other game developers, especially if you want to, like, kind of work with other indie developers in the future. It just discourages them to ever interact with you. But there's one more big bombshell that happened recently, and I think that really highlights the pettiness of this dude. So since obviously Overjump Rally is heavily inspired by the Sega Rally games, Xander was part of a community server on Discord for the Sega Rally games. And it just so happens that the original Sega Rally games have some issues running on modern PC hardware because they're very old. And so it was the hope of the Sega Rally community for someone who knows a thing or two about modding and, improving games, fixing games, to come in and make some kind of patch to help these games run on modern hardware. And one person who has done some great work getting older games, especially the older Grand Theft Auto games, to run decently on modern PCs with a lot of patches and fixes, is Silent. And so when he wanted to actually join the Sega Rally Discord server so that he can kind of talk to the community at hand and just kind of get an idea for what's broken and for where he could actually help, he found out that he was banned before he even joined. I guess he's saying here, so nice to be invited to a Sega Rally Discord server to try and help with some Sega Rally 2 crashes as people there agree. I am likely the only person who can fix them, just to be banned. So it just so turns out that Xander had modding rights on this server and just took the liberty to just ban Silent before he even did anything. Which is just so petty. And you might wonder why. It's because Silent was already very critical towards pretty much everything we've talked about, especially the Steam Deck debate that I mentioned earlier, but also stuff that I didn't mention in this video. So it's basically just some random personal beef Xander has with Silent that he then just took the liberty to completely restrict his access to the Sega Rally community's Discord server, although the entire community needs his help, which is so stupid. No one cares about his personal beef with Silent. Nobody. And everyone agreed that this is a stupid reason to ban him from the community server because it has nothing to do with the Sega Rally games. Like, this is from the Sega Rally Discord server. Like, he's replying to a message that said the following. Well, here's the thing. This server is for the Sega Rally series. It's not to play Grudge. And then he openly admits and says, I honestly don't care if it looks good. This guy has been awful to me for over a year with all kinds of slander and smearing. He called me a fraud, a scammer, a thief. Which I honestly could not find any evidence of. I'm not sure if he's just making this up or where this is coming from. He says, I've been silent on this topic to avoid Streisand, like the Streisand effect. But my patience is running low. Well, do I have good news for you? The Streisand effect is now hitting you in the face tenfold. Because without this drama, I would not make this video right now. And you want me to welcome him to a place I moderate? Not a chance. You do the same. In fact, everyone would do the same. Except all the people in the community that disagree with his actions. And then he was further criticized for this. Someone said, like I said, this is not your personal server, it's a gaming community server. Which is absolutely correct. But then he retaliates, it's a server I've grown through the years, not a public space. While I'm not the founder, I'm one of the two admins. The other one hasn't posted in months, and I swear this is gonna be relevant in a moment. I will not let a psycho stalker stay around. Sorry. So the admin that he mentioned, the main admin of the server, who has literally been inactive for literal months, got wind of this situation, came out of hibernation to strip Xander of his moderation rights over this. Like, as Silent reports, the admin who hasn't posted in months came back, they saw Xander's actions and stripped admin powers for abusing them, then Silent got re-invited, and then he was asked to make his own server about his own game instead of taking over the Sega Rally one. Absolute cinema. This is absolute cinema, guys. And well, this is kind of where things stand at the moment. So needless to say, this is all incredibly hilarious and was beyond avoidable. Now, I want to finish this video by saying don't go out of your way to harass this dude. Don't mention him in any tweets. Don't do anything to rile him up. All of this is pointless. You're just wasting your time. Instead, just ignore him. That is ultimately the worst thing you can do to him anyways, is to just ignore him and his project. And on the off chance that he is watching right now, if he's watching this video, please take some time off social media. Like, this is chronically online behavior. I hate to just say it how it is, but this is what it is. You are firing off tweets after tweets after tweets. You're getting into all kinds of drama. And this is clearly hindering your ability to even work on the game. Like, look, I'm always up for a great comeback story. And I would much rather for this dude to just be silent for a couple of months and then just come out swinging with an awesome new demo that really impresses people than for him to just keep digging himself into an even bigger and bigger hole and ultimately never really have anything come out of fruition. We've seen this with PirateSoftware and his game. We've seen this with YandereDev and his game as well. And I really do not want to see this again. Like, I really think this is like the last chance for this dude to like fully realize that he's spending too much time online and to just like lock the fuck in and work on the game. But who knows? Maybe at some point I have to make a follow-up video if there's more drama, but I sincerely, genuinely hope that this is the end of it and that this is all I need to report on this. Anyway, this covers the drama of the week. Thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time with a more chill video. Until then, take care, take it easy, and as always, peace. See you guys.